They say we're loud, opinionated, afraid, telling us to hush, dim our historical light. But darlings, we're the heartbeat, sharp and keen, unveiling the truth behind the silver screen.
History harpies, hear us roar. Through the ages we explore. Fashion, film, and TV's lore.
Hi everyone, welcome to History Harpies. This is episode 3. And I'm Lauren.
And I'm Christine.
Christine, how has your week been going?
That is a great but a really difficult question, Lauren, because as I think you know, I've been really, really sick. I've been really sick, and I obviously won't describe that to our listeners. But the good thing is that I came home from a wonderful trip to New York City, and I was really happy to do that. So that was a great way to start my week.
I'm so glad you had such a great time in New York. And I just saw a picture of Christine with some of her childhood friends, which actually relates to what we're going to be talking about in the pod in a little bit.
It does.
And I know that was amazing for you to see people that you grew up with, but probably haven't seen in some time.
I haven't. And actually, I saw another childhood friend during that trip who unfortunately could not make it to seeing our other friends. But it is really wonderful to have friends, people who have been in my life since 7th grade, which I have to say was a while ago, Lauren. 7th grade was a while ago.
Yeah, just seems like just yesterday for me. Yeah, 7th grade.
Seems
wow.
like yesterday.
Wow.
And of course, middle school is just something we all like to look back on.
Right. It's all I
there
think
a
about
better
is my
time?
time in middle school and
better
how
time
fondly
than
I
anyone's.
remember it, and how great I felt about myself. Oh God. So glad I never have to think about that again.
So, how was your week, Lauren?
Well, my week has been going well. It's been a busy week as classes are slowing down, but I have 2 kids going to the prom, and so we have been all about the prom preparations, the beautification, the dates, the corsages, the dresses, the after party dresses, the multiple things that go into going to a prom. And one thing that is different in 2025 as for compared to when you and I went to the prom is now you go to multiple events, some which are chaperoned by multiple adults. Before, during, and after the prom. These are things that would not have been attractive to me as an 18-year-old or a 16-year-old or any high school age. But apparently now this is what we do. Just like we take our kids to college and then visit them every weekend and Facebook with the other parents taking their kids to college. Now we go to the prom with them.
I have no interest in ever going to a prom again. Although I will say I did have a good time at both of my proms. But the idea that there are now regulations, legal riders to go to prom, you have to sign off.
Right.
And as I told you, Lauren, the idea that this generation, unlike our generation, they're just never going to have any fun at prom. And after prom.
Or ever.
I hate to say
all the fun has been taken out of prom. I mean, what is prom if you can't go and get totally wasted and then just to go to a field or somebody's basement or, I don't know, the back of a car somewhere.
And where I grew up in New England, you went to someone's camp.
Oh,
someone's cabin out in the woods.
Oh, interesting.
And ideally, we're not murdered by a serial killer when you were there.
Yeah. Well, now you go to a party where you're likely to see your own parents. So,
but can I add the detail? Because I think it's a really important one. Can I add the detail that you married your prom date?
I did.
And so prom really was a very, very special moment for Lauren because she and her prom date have now been married for a very long time.
25 years.
Which is remarkable and wonderful.
I married my prom date, who wasn't he actually went to several proms before he went to my prom. He actually went to the prom with my best friend, to the junior prom with my best friend, who wasn't dating him at the time. And this is probably more than our listeners need to know. But prom does hold a very special place in my heart because it is a special moment for my partner and I, and we have our prom songs, and sometimes we still even play them and dance to them.
That's so, as it should be. I'm just going to add one more prom note before we move on to the theme of this week.
Sure.
And that is, and I had completely forgotten this detail until right now. I actually went to both my junior and senior proms with one of my friends that I saw this past weekend in New York City.
Really?
I had completely forgotten that. So tying it all together.
All ties together.
This
all ties together. And again, I went to the prom with several different people, some random, some not so random, and some people that I was madly in love with, as is the case with my husband, right? But
at least I hope we're still talking about
yeah, right. But there are several ways one can experience prom, and let me just say again, it should never be a way where your own parents are there.
No. I shudder to think.
Anyway, so moving on to friends and friendships and Frenemies. The theme this week is thinking about friends and bitches on TV. And bitches in film and other iterations. Now, to be clear, Christina and I are going to have several episodes where we move into several subgenres of the bitches on screen or elsewhere motif.
It's an evergreen topic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think Lauren and I are both interested in is that, as with the theme of our pod generally, we might think that things like bitch friends or frenemies is a recent invention. And certainly one of the things that is fun to explore is the idea that it isn't.
Right.
That is, we might think, Lauren, that changes in feminism over the decades, that changes in women's work, in women's relationships, ideas of, say, like self-care, emotional labor, all of this language that we hear a lot now, we might think that those changes in women's status change their friendships. And I'm not really sure if we can think about it in that super direct way, that maybe we always see these complications with women's friendships, no matter what.
Yes, women's friendships are one of the most complicated relationships that I can think of. You and I, of course, have a perfect friendship.
We do.
With no complications. But
Lauren sounds sarcastic, but in fact, Lauren and I have very few conflicts.
We do. We do have very, very few conflicts. However, over the years, I'm sure you and I have had enough bitch drama with other women.
Yeah, absolutely the case.
To fill, I don't even know how many pages of books of most women.
How many podcast episodes?
How many people in their lives have frenemies and people and drama and all of that? So we decided to explore 3 different texts this week. And even though the White Lotus season 3 ended a couple weeks ago, it's still something that people are talking about. There's lots of memes, particularly Parker Posey memes. I actually just got a tennis one the other day, which was actually kind of funny. But there are all kinds of memes still going around, particularly about the 3 women, the fancies, the blondies, I don't know, they have different names that people are calling them, who were depicted in season 3 of The White Lotus. And we thought that might be a fun way to start, to talk about them and then to connect them with some other texts that have these kinds of frenemies, these long-term friends, and then friends in fancy places. Because we have 3 texts with friends in fancy places. In the case of the White Lotus, they're of course at this posh resort in Thailand. In the case of Gossip Girl, they're all over the Upper East Side and other fancy places in New York and elsewhere.
Doing amazing things.
And in the women, we have fancy women on the Upper East Side as well, and then doing other fabulous things. Spas, resorts, yachts.
Spa seems to be a kind of central theme.
Spa is a central theme. Spa is central to all of this. So let's start talking about these women from the White Lotus. There are 3 of them. One is the Michelle Monaghan character, Jacqueline, who is an actress of some sort in Hollywood. We have the Carrie Coon character, Lori, who is a lawyer
in New York City. And a single parent.
With a marriage that didn't end so well. And then we have
Kate from Texas.
From
Austin, Texas. Which is a strange
choice given her political leanings and characterization.
Dallas would have made a lot more sense than Austin.
Yeah. Or
sorry, Mike. I hate to say it. I hate to say that Mike White has made any errors at all. But anyway.
Right. So anyway, those three women go to the White Lotus with the idea of reconnecting, having a girls' weekend. They've known each other since they were in childhood.
Friends? Who knows?
The age of Christine knew her friends, at least, if not earlier. And
Jacqueline has paid for the trip. An important detail.
Yes, Jacqueline has paid for the trip, although the other two are women of means who easily could have contributed their portions.
I think that's fair to say about Kate. I think I'm not so certain perhaps about Lori.
Well, maybe she could have stayed in a smaller room.
Yes.
And they are in this completely ridiculous,
a fantastic villa.
Yes.
But she could have the studio. Lori would have a studio.
Lori could have a regular hotel room.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
All right.
I agree.
But then that would have been weird.
That would have been
for the
weird.
other two to have the villa and Lori to have the.
But Lori is staying slightly separately from the other two in the villa, in the complex. Okay. And so it's very clear, we see almost immediately when we're introduced to these three friends, that there's this sort of 2 against 1 sense.
Right.
And in the very first episode, it's clearly set up that it's Lori, the one who is on the out, and that the other two are perhaps more successful than she is, more confident than she is, maybe prettier than she is. And so that is what we are led to expect in the first season, but obviously that doesn't hold the whole time throughout the season.
Right. Yeah, because anytime someone leaves the room is sometimes the case with 3. 3 is the worst number. In terms of friendships. There's always some backstabbing and nasty comments about the person who is left. And so we see different triangulations of this friendship when we find out that Kate is perhaps a Trump voter, and then the other two are joining together. And then we also see moments where Jacqueline leaves, and Jacqueline is allegedly stuck up and fixated on her looks and
willing to cheat on her husband,
and part of the
male attention,
part of the Hollywood scene. So there are all kinds of allegiances that are both brought together, but also falling apart, depending on the actions of the person who is absent, or the person's actions, whether it's Jacqueline sleeping with the Valentine, or again Kate's political leanings or anything like that. So that these relationships are really, really volatile at any point.
And one of the things that's interesting about that volatility is that it both is to some extent dependent upon what happens at the resort, right? Like Jacqueline actually sleeping with Valentine while she has been pushing Lori towards him. But there's also, of course, this sensibility that we can't really understand, that it's, of course, based upon things that have happened in their previous lives, right? They're in that sort of 2-to-1 dynamic that you're talking about. There's always a reference to these sort of mysterious things that happened in the past, right? That we don't necessarily know about. Like, for example, the suggestion that Jacqueline came on to Kate's husband, right, at Lori's wedding, which is probably the most serious thing that comes up when they talk. But one of the things that is, I think, missing to me in that dynamic, in all of those sort of callbacks to the past, is a real positive sense of sort of what they had in common in the first place, right? What really held together the friendship, both when they were younger and throughout these decades. We obviously see sort of the cattiness, the bitchiness, the different alliances, all of that. But I think it's one thing we absolutely absent is what was the commonality, right? What were the sympathies? What did they talk about when they were 16? What did they talk about when they were 30?
But
we also kept them together.
There is the possibility, and I think it's a good possibility, that Jacqueline, who may be lost as an aging actress and needing some real people in her life, has invited these two friends on a paid vacation to Thailand, because we don't get the sense that these women are, say, texting every day or in each other's lives on a, again, very regular basis, because there are details that are revealed when they're together that are new.
Yes, this is not an annual trip that they take together.
No, and I often felt watching this that it was Jacqueline saying, hey, we haven't seen each other in so long, and I'm sick of being surrounded by celebrities, and why don't I take my two oldest girlfriends who maybe now I know nothing about. And at one point, we were wonderful friends, right?
Well, and I think an additional component to that is interesting to think about is, and thinking about women's friendships generally, is it the case, if what you are talking about is accurate, are we supposed to think then that Jacqueline wants to put herself in a situation where she is the queen bee, that as an aging actress in Hollywood, right, she's surrounded by younger women, more beautiful women, she has this younger husband that she is very clearly sort of jealous of. So is it the idea that she assumes that she will have a kind of position of dominance with these other two friends, and that is a really, really nasty underbelly of this friendship of the three of them, that they are not necessarily jockeying for that dominance, but that Jacqueline assumes she will have it because she is the most beautiful. She is,
and because she's paying for the vacation,
and because she's paying for it. And so it is interesting to think: is there like a different version of Jacqueline, right, back in LA, that is more fragile, more vulnerable, and that in a sense the friendship is a prop for her ego? And obviously there's senses of that in the show itself, right? That Kate and Laurie hint at exactly that.
I think that's a good point. And I think that's something that White is trying to get at. On the other hand, I also think it's really really astute of him to position them in all these different settings where we see the incredible privilege of all of them, despite whatever kinds of conflicts there are in their own relationships. They still see themselves as only deserving of, say, the White Lotus. They don't want to go to that other resort, right?
But of course, then age is playing a role too.
Right. And
that they're so insulted that Valentine thinks that they should go to an older, senior.
Right. They also don't want to be around regular people.
Exactly.
When they go into
the great unwashed.
They go, right. They go, they're completely soaked among in this ceremony, and they definitely don't want to be around local people in Thailand either. So there's the larger element of their own privilege and their own world that they embody, and then the conflicts that they see when they're with one another that are in a lot of ways removed from the circumstances of their vacation at the White Lotus.
Although, of course, then we do see Laurie going to the fight, right? So they do go to the club, where, of course, the club also has a lot of expats, right? When they go to the dance.
That's a kind of tourist voyeurism, kind of, she's kind of, simulating.
But come on. I mean, where's the... but then you have to say, where's the line between I am trying to participate in this culture and tourist voyeurism, right? But at the it gives her an opportunity to establish herself as an individual, right? Where she's not one of the friends, where she's not in this kind of little threesome.
But she's also trying to get even.
Yes.
So she's going not only to see the fight, but potentially to pick up one of the other men, to have an experience like the one Jacqueline had, because she is hurt and offended by what Jacqueline did with Valentine. Not because she has any strong feelings for Valentine, but just because Jacqueline had slept with him because she could, and again, after trying to set Valentine and Laurie up.
Okay, so here's an important question.
Okay.
Actually, I have two important questions.
Okay.
One is, so does Jacqueline ever actually want Laurie to sleep with Valentine? And what would your reaction have been if you were Lori? If you were Lori and you found out that Jacqueline had slept with Valentine? Because, of course, Kate thinks that Lori is not going to be disturbed by this at all.
Right.
That it will be yet another story in the story of Jacqueline hooking up with men.
Right. And, what would I have thought? Well, if I was truly not interested in Valentine at all, or thought of him as just maybe somebody I'd have a fling with on vacation, but I wasn't interested, I probably would not react as strongly as Lori did to Jacqueline hooking up with him. Just probably would go like Lori did to a fight the next night and find a Valentine proxy, because Valentine and his friends are fairly interchangeable, and again, it wasn't like she was that interested in him to begin with, and she had to be pushed and prodded, and then eventually she was sort of interested, but it wasn't, she didn't have her eyes set on Valentine the whole time.
But I think I disagree with that a little tiny bit, only in the sense that, right, the feeling I get from her character is that she is used to being the plain one. I'm doing air quotes here, by the way. She's used to being the plain one. She's used to being the not pursued one. She's used to being the not desired one. And so, in a sense, her holding back, right, in that threesome with her friends, that sounded funny when I said it.
Right.
But her holding back is out of protection, right? That she knows that Jacqueline and then Kate, they're going to be the ones who get the attention. And so not coming out forcefully and saying, yes, I want Valentine, that this is self-protection. And that's yet another reason why she's so hurt.
But I guess I sort of disagree with that, because, as you said earlier, we just don't know enough to really come to some of these conclusions. Because also she's the only one that's single. So even though Kate and Jacqueline may be pursued more often, and again, we just don't know what's happened in the past. There are also two people who have said, here's our single friend. They've offered her up that way. So it could be because she's used to being offered up because she's been single. I don't know. Again, it's the kind of thing where we don't know what the dynamics are. And Lori is certainly more uninhibited than Kate, who's very buttoned up and very stiff. And we see scenes of them dancing and scenes of them in the pool. And Lori is definitely ready to go, okay, in ways that Kate is not. And Jacqueline just wants all the attention. And they're again, your idea about props is important, because then the question is, well, if one prop is removed, Kate, who's ready to go to bed, put her pajamas on,
get all the guys out of there,
then Lori becomes the threat. And that's something to think about. But it's also something to wonder about in their earlier relationships, whether these have been women who have been stealing each other's boyfriends and getting in the way of romantic entanglements for a longer time, as maybe with Kate's husband. But we're just,
and we just don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. Well, I think one thing we absolutely have to bring up about that friendship before we move on is that really marvelous exchange at the end before they leave.
Yes.
And where we have this on the part of Jacqueline and Kate, right, this sense of happiness and joy, and we're so grateful for this time together. And then obviously Lori has that fantastic monologue about how, in fact, she has just been sad. It has made her feel so depressed. She really senses how much she is missing from her life, what has gone wrong. But nevertheless, at the end, with this real sense of affirmation, she wants her friend Jacqueline to be beautiful. She's glad that Kate has such a happy, content life. And I read something online, I don't remember where, that said they thought that was a completely unrealistic exchange. And I actually found it to be incredibly realistic.
Yeah.
Absolutely true to life for that long of a friendship, right? A decades-long friendship with all of these complications.
And women of that age who aren't shown in long-term friendships in this way as much, to have this sort of memory, self-reflection, compared experiences, and to be talking about them that way, because it is a hard thing, of course, to be single. We don't know what her relationship is with her daughter. It sounds like it's not too good with her ex-husband, and she's questioning whether she's put too much time into her work. So maybe she's confused on all of these different fronts, and she is with friends who, at least on the surface, project that they have it all. And whether that's true or not, again, obviously Jacqueline is cheating on her husband, and that marriage is not perfect. Yes. But we don't really know a lot about Kate, and Laurie is the most honest in at least admitting her insecurities and her vulnerability at that stage of life, which I think a lot of women can relate to. And I do think it is realistic and very brave of her to say in front of those friends.
I agree about the bravery. And I also think that one of the things that comes out in that conversation certainly is important to us as historians and to all of us who have long-term friends. The idea that it really is that time, right, sacralizes these friendships. And one of the things I think that is so interesting to me about that, a couple of years ago, I should have looked it up. There was a wonderful article about friendship that one of my friends from grad school sent me, remember?
Yes.
We should have looked it up.
Yes.
And I sent it to another friend. And one of the things I said to her at the time is, obviously you have to keep a balance between honoring all of this time you have spent with this person, right? Decades.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to say, but I want to be with the person, be friends with the person that you are right now.
Right.
Right. And really honoring that.
Yes.
But just as Laurie says, it means something to be friends with people for that long, right? Where it's not this kind of pro forma, I'll just kind of, see you when I'm in town or whatever. Even if you do just see them when you're in town.
Right.
But where you always are kind of telling yourself, there is a meaning to this relationship that makes me want to renew it, right? Every time. Right. As opposed to just that it's this desiccated thing that I'm kind of still keeping up with for no clear reason I understand, right? And I think that is what came, that article, that conversation that I had with my friend, that is what came up to me also in exactly what Laurie says. Right. That time has we're fighting. I might hate you. I might be jealous of you. But that time that we have had together really sacralizes this. Yeah. And it's something special. It is something sacred.
It is something special. It's funny that we started out with these women as bitches and at least in this part of our pod, ending with them very sweetly, even though they are bitches to some extent to,
and that can be
to each other. And those things exist all together.
Yeah. So they do. And I don't want to say they're compatible, right? But in a sense, they are compatible. They are compatible. So maybe that's a good moment to move on to the women. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're talking about. We're talking about Gossip Girl.
Don't skip over Blair and Serena, please.
That just shows you how unhappy I am with Blair and Serena right now. That I was. I'm almost done the final season. Okay. So
that might be a season too many. So Gossip Girl, for those of you listeners who don't remember it or haven't seen it, came out in the early aughts. And 2004, I believe. Again, most of you have probably heard of Blake Lively, but this was her launching point, and it was put out by the same writer creator that did The OC, another good one. And there's a lot of hybrid exchange and similar, if not identical, DNA between Gossip Girl and the OC. But we thought we would talk about Gossip Girl because it does connect to our themes of female friendship, bitching, and also these kind of longer term relationships that transcend different moments, also different generations. In Gossip Girl, and there are many seasons of Gossip Girl. I don't even know how many, but the first couple are worth taking a look.
Absolutely.
And if you are into New York fashion, drama, sex,
spike heels,
all of it,
mini skirts,
it's for you.
If you're into seeing 17-year-olds legally drink at bars all over New York City where no one ever cards them.
No one ever cards them.
And people who magically have full-time jobs, even though I don't even know if they've graduated from college or not.
And people who go to college and maybe have never gone to one class.
Although we are familiar with that.
We are familiar with that
From
dynamic.
the other direction.
Yes,
From the other direction.
We are. So so there is Gossip Girl, voiced by Kristen Bell, who is this omniscient online, what do you call her? Purveyor of
gossip,
hot takes about these, only for some reason, these like 7 people.
New York has 9 million people living in it.
And posts about these 7
high schoolers,
who
then
go
college
to,
students.
who go to Constance/St. Jude, elite private school, and post their whereabouts and who's sleeping with who and who's doing what drugs and who's wherever. But the key to this show are female friendships or frenemies.
And I do think frenemies is a good word to use here. Okay. Because when the show begins, the very first episode of the first season, Blair is the queen bee of this girls' school, Constance, and her formerly best friend, Serena Vanderwoodson, has just returned from a mysterious time away in boarding school. And it is very much established immediately that they are now enemies, having been best friends beforehand. Although why, it's initially unclear. And so we actually start the show in a really negative space in terms of female friendships. They have had a falling out because the other component, of course, is that in the absence of Serena, Blair has nothing but minions, which I actually find one of the more disturbing components of the show. So girls who dress
sit
like
on the
Blair,
Met
sit
steps
on the
with
Met,
her.
Always have to sit on a lower level of the steps, have to do whatever she says. This mysteriously lasts into her 20s that she still has young women serving as minions for her.
Unpaid minions. Who, by the way, are really wealthy on their own. And there's no reason why they have to follow this person around. Because
completely unclear. Yeah. Completely unclear. And so we then see over the course of multiple seasons that the friendship between Serena and Blair, it warms back up, it cools back down. They have plots against each other. They support each other.
They both get into Yale. They both don't get into Yale.
They both date, 2 of the same men at different times.
They both date Nate and they both date Dan.
Let's not talk about that anymore because that whole Dan Blair thing was traumatizing.
But their friendship is what holds the show together. At least they see it that way. And their friendship is very, very important to one another, even when they are frenemies and even when they're not speaking. And their friendship is something that, even though it's very, very problematic, when they're not friends, the show goes into very odd spaces.
Well, it's definitely narratively necessary, right? That they have these conflicts, that they don't have these conflicts. And I do think there's almost, though, a kind of whiplash feel to the show in that they're either in this sort of sisterhood moment where they're family and they're so dependent upon each other and they're best friends, or they are backstabbing each other, right? We don't have a lot of middle ground.
No.
Where it's kind of like, well, I'm just sort of mad at you because X.
The underpinning of all of this is that both of them have grown up in incredibly dysfunctional families with very, very difficult mothers. And
largely absent fathers.
And they both have had to rely on one another as confidence, for support, for sort of unconditional love, because they have not received that from their own families.
I agree with that, but of course what we don't see from them is unconditional love. In fact, the love between them is actually quite conditional, right? In terms of saying, well, I want to get ahead. I want to go to Yale. For example, the whole Yale thing, right? So Serena applies to Yale. She gets into Yale. I mean, who knows why? And this is something that, of course, creates this huge drama, and it's seen as a betrayal, right?
It is, but when Serena is on a bender, which is many times, the unconditional love from Blair and others is we're a group. We're not going to tell anybody. We're not going to rat you out. We're going to let you sleep wherever, and you can dry out with us, and you can tell us what happened. And if you, by accident, murdered someone, you can tell us that happened with that OD guy.
Yes,
right?
the guy. Yeah,
so the unconditional love isn't you can succeed and I'll support you. Mm-hmm. The unconditional love is you can do a lot of really, really shitty things and I'm not going to tell anybody.
Until I'm mad at you a year later and then I'll tell Gossip Girl.
Correct.
I mean, I think what I've been thinking of a lot is it's the entire show has such a dark and pessimistic and depressing view of female friendships. So there basically are none in the show. So tabling for a moment, Blair and Serena.
Okay.
Because it's so complicated. Right?
Okay.
They are backstabbing each other all the time.
Right.
So we have the character for a while of Jenny Humphrey.
Right.
Who has
no friends.
No
female friends.
She has
Eric, but then she backstabs him.
Yes. So she has minions briefly, but of course minions are not friends.
Right.
So, okay, Serena has briefly Poppy for a friend.
Right.
Who is also kind of backstabbed and goes away. Georgina Sparks, who's a wonderful character.
But so evil.
And again, Michelle Trachtenberg, what a wonderful actress. You know, very sorry about her passing away so young. The character was wonderful, but is a friend also who is a backstabber and evil. So she's not a
friend
real
to no one.
Friend to no one. So then we have these kind of random female characters like
Vanessa.
Ivy, Vanessa. Again, all backstabbing. Nobody has a close friend that can be relied upon.
And Lily has no
friends.
Lily has no friends. And Lily obviously does not get along with her sister, does not get along with her mother, she's not really friends with Eleanor. I mean, the two of them are...
And we're given this moment, right, when Lily is under house arrest for her crime. We won't mention about that. And where Nate Archibald's mother says to her, in effect, we women are just paying you back because you were such a bitch to us before, and now we're glad to see you fall. And so going through all of the female characters, even Dorota the maid has no female friends.
Nope.
So to me, I think it's really fascinating that a creative team that was one man and one woman, right? That
Josh Schwartz
and Stephanie's last name I'm blanking. We should have looked that up too. That there is not a single kind of ride or die female friendship in the entire and not just that, right? You don't even have people who are like casual friends.
Well, I would say maybe some of the threesomes with Chuck, the women are friends with each other.
Perhaps.
They may be friends.
All the hookers and
all of
strippers.
Chuck's random women that come in.
There needs to be the Chuck and Nora crossover.
Chuck may hook up with two women who are low-key friends.
That is an excellent point. But other than that, other than one of Chuck's many threesomes, and I think that is so interesting because you can argue that even the men have more friendships. And obviously we're not talking today about male friendships. But it's so interesting to me that Serena and Blair are held up as being, again, this like, you're my family.
Right.
Because the landscape, the backdrop is so miserable. And even when Blair and Serena are in fights, they literally have no other female friends.
No friends.
None. Zero. And so how is this even possible? Again, what sort of picture of female friendship are we getting? That again, boys are driving them apart.
It's not a good one, but maybe it's more about Constance and elite boarding schools and the culture that creates. And maybe it's trying to say something about that. Because I'm now thinking so on the OC, of course, we have Marissa and Summer, who are besties. And who are mostly uncomplicated besties. But of course, also in their case, there's a sort of mystery, and I think you and I have talked about this before, where Marissa Cooper is supposed to be the most popular girl in school, and she has no friends other than Summer. True. And it's when Marissa dies, R.I.P., that Summer has no other female friends, Taylor.
Except for Taylor, who is a grudging. We probably shouldn't talk about Taylor because it's such an upset.
It's going to trigger you.
It is. So I think that's, it is interesting to think, what is it about their wealth, as you say, the dysfunctional sort of high status families that they are raised in. They're going again to these super, super high pressure schools that are obviously supposed to be like Dalton and Spence, right, in the Upper East Side, that they're used to getting everything they want. Right. And so does that have any impact on their friendship? That is, for example, if someone like Blair doesn't get into Yale, is it simply because she's so used to being privileged otherwise that she will even turn away from a supposed best friend the moment she doesn't get anything she wants? If Blair and Serena are farm girls in Nebraska, basically, are they more likely to have a solid friendship?
I think Josh Schwartz would say yes. Yes, that all of these material issues, concerns, status, and the one thing that I never understood about Gossip Girl, and this comes out in the Netflix trailer for it, okay, is that going to an Ivy is the most important thing for these kids, right? When in fact, like, who fucking cares?
Big whoopsie.
Right? They have tons of money. As we see with Chuck, he's running an empire.
When he's 19.
Blair is running Waldorf Designs even when she's supposedly in college student. So it really doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
In the scheme of things. And Chuck says to Serena at one point, you and I aren't made for college.
Not made for
like
college.
We're
we
like
don't need
above it.
Yes.
But again, Blair has her heart set on Yale. Why, we actually really don't know. And again, why she wouldn't just expect to not work at all, or work for Waldorf Designs, or just go wherever she goes and party and befriend some other rich girls and go upon her way.
And club and be an it girl.
Yeah, and just be an it girl. Being an it girl is what matters to her. And that seems to go against the whole Yale thing, which is going away from the friendship thing, I understand. But it's important because if you are an it girl, you need a lot of friends.
That would seem to be a requirement to be on page 6 regularly. But it comes back to one of the same dynamics as White Lotus, though. The idea that fundamentally, right, even in or especially in these very privileged environments, jealousy is a natural component in female friendships. And obviously there's lots of ways in which this works itself out, right? In less prestigious or less privileged environments, right? I mean, again, parents who are going on Facebook pages to say, my kid's applying to Harvard or whatever. Not that I have that experience, but, maybe never will. But anyway, so I think that is something else that is, this kind of lurking dynamic that is not ideal, right, in depictions of female friendships. The idea of that it becomes, in a sense, a zero-sum game. There are only so many men out there. There are only so many Yale acceptances out there. There are only so many kind of, starring roles, so many couture dresses, right, so many chairmanships of a board, right, a charity board, and that women are in competition for them. And I'm not saying this isn't reflecting reality, right? I'm not denying that.
Right.
But it absolutely is the case, right? That certainly in what we've talked about so far, that we have exactly this theme, right? That the competition is unavoidable and that the jealousy is unavoidable. And I think what my big complaint is about Gossip Girl, as much as I'm enjoying watching it, my big complaint is that I assume we're not going to have that moment in Gossip Girl like we do in The White Lotus, right? Where The White Lotus, at least right? And as we just talked about, you feel very much at the end with that monologue, the jealousy, the competition, it simply is part of a bigger, more magnificent package.
Right.
Of course, I have zero faith, right? The Gossip Girl is going to end in a way that says, you know what, this can just be part of a big, complex, beautiful whole of female friendship.
Well, and part of it too is that because Gossip Girl, and we've only, of course, talked about the female friendship, is so much about romantic relationships and ultimately the goal of finding your man and, locking that down and competing for the same men and more exclusive men. And that's just a huge through line in that show. And in a way, obviously, it isn't with the women that we see in The White Lotus. So there's that. And it seems like Gossip Girl goes in that direction, explores that more carefully than it does the female friendships. And it's interesting that Gossip Girl coming out at around or after Sex in the City, you know, or same kind of coverage, that it doesn't do the deep dive into what really makes women connect with one another in a way that Sex in the City does. And also what makes women despise each other. Other than just hair pulling and like, you know, you didn't come to my sleepover, or you wore my mom's dress and I wanted to wear my mom's dress, or you dated that guy and those sorts of things.
Well, and of course, because we don't see, in the case certainly of Blair and Serena, it's not like we see they're not sitting around a diner table, right, having a conversation.
Right.
In the way that is obviously built into Sex and the City.
Right.
Right. And, of course, built into White Lotus, right? Everyone's sitting at a table having these conversations. That never happens.
No,
right?
it's just it's a lot of walk and talk.
A lot of walk and talk, a lot of stomping in and out in the 6-inch spike.
And a lot of proms.
And a lot of proms. A lot of proms. But you know what? I asked you, this might be maybe the last thing we should talk about before we move on to the women. So I asked you that question about the White Lotus and how you would respond if you were Lori.
Okay.
So my question about Gossip Girl is...
Where would I go if I had Lily's credit card?
No. And the question is not, why is Lily always, again, wearing statement necklaces even if she's home under house arrest? The question is, so... You are Blair.
Okay.
You are dating Dan.
Okay.
Who used to date your best friend Serena. I know this is hard mental space to get into because it's so unpleasant. But the question is...
Well, also because it's conjuring images of Penn Badgley in You. Which are very different than him in Gossip Girl.
Agreed. But, so you find out as Blair, not to say she's done this yet in the show, but you find out that your best friend Serena... had sex with your boyfriend, Dan, in the back room of, like, a party and filmed it on her phone on purpose to basically destroy your life. So do you still consider her to be your best friend?
I do not. I draw the line there.
That would seem to be a very natural line that a lot of people would draw. Yeah. If you knowingly go have sex with my boyfriend and you're my best friend and you film it to make me feel bad...
But Serena also did that with Nate, without the filming part.
Without the filming part. But at least in that case, she was drunk. She was drunk.
Oh, she wasn't drunk when she did it the second time?
No, because it's all a plot. Right?
But I thought she was still drunk.
No.
Are they always
Well,
drunk?
they are always kind of drunk. But in the Dan thing, she is doing it on purpose. It is a scheme.
I understand. I understand it's a scheme, and the first one happened more spontaneously.
Well, I think she did maybe like a couple of shots, but it doesn't matter because she still is planning on doing that to her best friend.
Right. Sleeping with one's best friend's boyfriend is usually a game changer.
If you do it once, it's an accident. If you do it twice,
shame on me.
Shame on me. Shame on you. Okay, maybe that's where we should leave Gossip Girl. on that note.
So speaking of women who sleep with each other's husbands, that's a nice segue. So if I make that statement, you might think I'm referring to a TV show or movie that's on Netflix right now. But in fact, I am referring to the 1939 film, The Women, in which women do sleep with each other's husbands.
And have a lot of sassy comebacks.
A lot of dialogue in that one.
A lot of dialogue. So The Women, for those of you who have not seen it, and just to emphasize, as Lauren just mentioned, we are not talking about the terrible remake of this film.
The Meg Ryan.
Meg
Ryan seems to come up on our podcast a lot.
That's so funny.
And then neither of us ever talk about her, ever.
It's so funny. This is the only time she ever comes up.
Okay.
So The Women is very well known for a couple of reasons, and one of those is it has an all-female cast. There is literally not a single male anywhere in the film. No waiters, even the dog is female. And this was done
There are more women than even a Yellow Jacket.
It's not a single male in sight the entire film. And so it stars Norma Shearer, who was an absolutely huge star throughout the 1930s, a Best Actress Oscar winner for a film I might mention a little bit later in our conversation. It featured Joan Crawford, who was just becoming a big star. She had been in some silent films in the 20s, but was about to just absolutely skyrocket. And a bunch of other actresses who had become well known, like Joan Fontaine. And it is also set in the Gossip Girl neighborhood, literally, of the Upper East Side in Manhattan, among wealthy women who spend their time getting their nails done, going to spas, going shopping, seeing models model clothes, and who also have houses in the country, right? Houses in the country. And really, basically, it is about a woman, Mary Haynes, who finds out accidentally that her husband is having an affair with slutty shop girl Crystal Allen.
Now, when you say she finds out accidentally, she does not find out. She finds out accidentally, but on purpose accidentally.
Thank you for adding that detail.
Because her friends are such bitches.
Total bitches.
That they continue to do the telephone game where they tell each other that Mary's husband is having an affair. They tell the manicurist that Mary's husband is having an affair. The manicurists all tell all of their shared clients that Mary's husband is unfaithful. And it is bound to come back to Mary. And her friends very much want it to come back to Mary.
And they send Mary, the super, super bitch, Sylvia, sends Mary to this particular manicurist that she knows will tell Mary her husband is having an affair. And granted, Sylvia doesn't do this because she is troubled by Mary's husband's affair.
No,
she just wants the drama.
The delight of seeing Mary's anguish from learning about this infidelity.
Because this couple has been taken to be this kind of golden couple. Again, obviously, we never encounter Mary's husband because there are no men in the film.
And also, other women's husbands have been unfaithful.
Yes.
So many of these women are thinking, well, Mary thinks she has it perfect, and actually, she's just like the rest of us.
She's just like the rest of us. Right. And so we have then the big dilemma of the film is what does Mary do about this information that her husband has had an affair? And there are lots of different options, right, that she tries. One of the things she attempts to do is to actually confront Crystal Allen, the fantastic Joan Crawford. Although she doesn't encounter Crystal on purpose, it's accidentally at a fashion show and clothes shop, and which is a really delicious exchange, I just have to say.
It is. But ultimately, she sees herself and maybe doesn't have a choice because her husband prefers to be with Crystal.
Which is a really remarkable outcome that we don't expect.
Because we don't think that married men leave their wives.
And because Norma Shearer, again, is fantastic and is really depicted as being sort of a good sport, right? And entertaining and loving, right? This isn't this sort of shrew.
No.
We're not talking about a dead bed.
And they have a daughter. They're seemingly happy family, at least from what we see of it, without the man.
Yes.
And that it would seem like he might have a fling, but that he wouldn't actually leave his wife, his delightful wife, his delightful daughter, for bitch Joan Crawford.
But of course, one of the main points of some of these friends/frenemies around her is that Mary herself has forced the issue. And this is actually the position of Mary's own mother, right? Mary's own mother basically says, well, your dad cheated on me, and I looked the other way, and this is the plight of all women. We just keep our mouths shut when we know that our husbands are unfaithful, and that's how marriages power through. But of course, the other important dynamic is that you do have a friend like Sylvia, who is trying to, in the guise of empowerment, saying, you have to leave him. Right? You have to get a divorce. You have to make him give her up. You cannot put up with this. And in part, again, it's under the guise of empowerment that Mary has to stand up for herself. But also, we are led to think, because Sylvia, again, wants the drama, wants Mary's perfect life to be dismantled. And so you do then also have the other women who are just like, well, it'd be fun if we had a divorcee hanging around.
Sure.
And so, but those are the choices that are really presented to us, right? That Mary either forces the issue and ends up alone, while her friends are clapping for her, or she just looks the other way and does nothing and just lets the affair peter out.
Right. So Mary upon learning that her husband is choosing to leave her, has to go to Reno to get a divorce. And on the way to Reno, she meets a cast of characters who are also all getting divorces, and they go to this ranch and are all, I guess, waiting for their divorce appointments. And while they are there, Mary encounters a young chorus girl named Miriam, who it turns out is having an affair with Sylvia's husband. And so this complicates matters further. Then we see Sylvia come. Sylvia discovers Miriam is having an affair with her husband. The two of them get into this total cat fight. They rip each other's clothes off. It's absolutely bonkers. But we start to see these women also forming a bond on this ranch as a whole bunch of women about to have a nervous breakdown, not really knowing what to do, but on the other hand, finding some solace in their sort of common plight, right?
And one of the things that's interesting about that, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, is the idea that in this kind of hothouse environment of the Upper East Side, right, in the Connecticut country houses, that kind of solidarity is not possible, right? The Joan Fontaine character is supposed to be this young, right, sort of sweet, winsome newlywed. She has a kind of bond with Mary and is more sweet. But the idea that in the Upper East Side, they can't form that bond. It's when they're all on a ranch in Nevada waiting for their divorces that everyone is kind of stripped down to the bone, right? They're wearing their simple clothes, right? And then they can find that sort of solidarity. Just like the Nebraska question, right? I asked you earlier.
Right. That's interesting. It's interesting removing them from the Manhattan world and seeing what happens when they're milking the cows and around the ranch and just doing ranching chores. And there are also other characters that live out there that host them that are so far from the world of Manhattan.
Yes, the Ma Kettle character.
The Ma Kettle,
But of course, what's also then interesting about that, and I think that this is something we don't see so much in our other programs, although obviously there's a dynamic in the White Lotus, is that social and economic class is so important in the women. Right. So Crystal Allen she's at a perfume counter. She works in a department store. This is how she meets Mary Haynes' husband in the first place. And she's a schemer, right? She wants to go after one of these wealthy men who's shopping for his wife. And then we obviously have the chorus girl. We have these women, the manicurists, right? The
exercise leaders.
Exercise leaders. So this whole sort of like underclass of women who are serving the wealthy Upper East Side women. But the dynamic is super clear that is the class that these women's husbands are choosing their mistress from. Right. And certainly what we are told about Stephen Haynes having an affair with Crystal Allen is that it really doesn't take much more than her flirting with him at the perfume counter.
Right.
And that's pretty much it.
Right.
And he ends up marrying her.
But we also learn later that she is conniving and that she understands how to manipulate men, because after they've been married for, I don't know, however long. Whatever, a year, she already has another guy that she's onto. Right. So she is somebody who knows how to work the system, who knows how to manipulate men, and who's gotten pretty good at it. So much so, again, that Stephen agrees to marry her. For reasons, again, that we don't fully understand. At least not in the context of what we see, because we don't ever see him.
And certainly there is this idea, so however much Mary is sort of quote unquote pushing him towards her by in effect saying pick her or me, it's never clear why he would pick Crystal Allen over Mary.
Especially when we see how awful and wretched Crystal Allen is towards the daughter.
Awful.
While that bathtub scene is amazing. It's an amazing scene. She's in the bath. She's on the phone with her lover. This little girl comes in to try to talk to her. She's so awful to her. She's saying, you're invading my privacy and you're going to rat me out to your dad. And she's just awful to her.
And it's another instance where you have evidence that Mary is the saint, right? Because one of the things that little Mary says is, my mother says that I have to be nice to you. Right? So we're even supposed to think that even at this moment where Crystal Allen is now Mrs. Stephen Haynes, that Mary is taking this high road, right?
Right.
And sort of elevating herself over these sort of petty sort of anger or jealousy or all of this other stuff.
And yet, after all this has happened, Mary has still holds out hope by the very end that she can get her marriage together, because Crystal has been the problem all along. And that even though her husband was attracted to her, slept with her, married her, Mary still feels like it's worth it. It's worth being married to him again. It's worth reuniting the family, and that, you know, bygones be bygones.
Bygones be bygones. And we have, again, this idea that there are, in this friend group that she is in, that you do have someone like Sylvia, who even at this moment where Mary might reconcile with her husband, that Sylvia tries to stop her.
Yes.
Right? And this whole sort of balance where, again, Sylvia says, if you have pride, you will not go back to the man who cheated on you. And of course, you have this wonderful last line, right? This is something a woman in love, you know, can't afford. And of course, we're all kind of like, well, Mary, you're a sap. Right. But also saying, oh, but what a happy ending. She's a sap, but what a happy ending. But still this idea, right, that someone like Sylvia, right, wants to ruin this woman's relationship. Right. That she'd rather see, again, Mary single forever than for whatever reason.
And that's an interesting parallel to the White Lotus, because this brings us back to the idea about Jacqueline and her friends as props, and women who need other women's misfortunes to elevate themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those dynamics, and we see them in Gossip Girl as well, with various characters.
One thing I just did want to add really quickly, because I think it's interesting, because in some ways the women, it seems really bold.
Yes.
In that, obviously, it's talking about adultery. Crystal Allen has this super, super sassy line where Mary says something like, what you're wearing right now, it looks so cheap. You know, I advise you not to buy it because Stephen doesn't like clothes like that. And Crystal comes back with the immortal, when Stephen doesn't like something I'm wearing, I just take it off. Which, again, you know, I'll put on a needle pillow. But, so we have then this idea that, wait, what was I going to say? What was I going to say?
I don't know.
I know. So we have this idea that it is sort of bold, right? It's talking about sex. It's talking about adultery. Crystal, again, super slutty. But it is also this affirmation of marriage, right? Absolutely.
Sure.
And the tiny little thing I wanted to mention. So in 1930, Norma Shearer wins the Best Actress Oscar for this film, The Divorcee, which is this sort of pre-code, you know, anything goes kind of movie. And the whole point of The Divorcee is she finds out, when she's been married for only 3 years, that her husband has cheated on her. And in response, she cheats on him. She sleeps with his best friend. And it is super obvious, right? The film does not shy away from this. And then they get a divorce, you know, things happen, et cetera, et cetera. And in some ways you have an ending very similar to the women, in that it's a reaffirmation of marriage. But in so many ways, the women is kind of this answer back to the divorcee, to say, well, okay, women's sexuality in the divorcee, it's affirmed, but then it's also not affirmed. Basically, the Norma Shearer character ruins her life by committing adultery. And her husband very much in that film just says, like, well, can't get over it.
Right.
You know, we all do it.
Right.
And obviously in the women, where we don't have any kind of male perspective, but we still have this almost more chastened, like, this is what a good wife does, right? Mary doesn't go out and get another lover or a boyfriend or anything. Right, she simply sort of tucks her tail between her legs and says, I don't want to get a divorce, but this is just the only option available to me. Until she is willing then to go back to her husband at the end.
Right, but I would say that the perspective are the male viewers of this film. And we might think of this as a film for women, but I would argue that it is a film for men. It is a film for men to say, these women can go through however much infidelity these men inflict on them, and at the end of the day, they are going to come back. They are going to be waiting by the phone. They are going to be waiting to hear that their husband has left their mistress and that they can get him back. And that in the 1939, with the United States still going through the Depression, with marriages on the decline, with divorce skyrocketing, that preserving the sanctity of marriage was really paramount. And I think this film is one in a series of many that tries to restore, as unconventional as it is in many ways, it comes back to traditional values in many other ways.
That's a good point. And we certainly have a sense that Crystal Allen has lost. She is lost. Mary has won and she has lost. Although, of course, then the big question mark is what happens the next time Stephen Haynes goes to buy perfume?
And that is an excellent question. And my guess is that there will be maybe a younger, maybe even more sassy sales girl who will catch his eye.
Perhaps. Let's hope not, for Mary Haynes' sake. Okay, well, I think it is then time for our book recommendations for the week, Lauren.
Okay. Well, my book recommendation is Susan Douglas's Where the Girls Are, Growing Up Female with the Mass Media, which is all about all kinds of cultural products, TV, film, music, that came out in the decades after World War II, and really the way that the media communicated different ideas about feminism, about female friendships, about resistance, about activism, all kinds of things. Susan Douglas is a wonderful scholar, and I recommend it if you want to put some of these texts in even more context.
That sounds great. I will read that book, Lauren. My book recommendation for the week is actually not a history book. It is Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And I'm not talking about the many adaptations, right? Not talking about Keira Knightley, not talking about Colin Firth, but the original novel by Jane Austen. And to me, what's really interesting about it with female friendship is, very famously, we have this family of 5 sisters where their own friendships within the family are unusual. The 2 younger sisters are very, very close. The 2 older sisters are very, very close. But the 5th one is kind of literally the 5th wheel. But there also is one female friendship in the novel between Elizabeth, the main character, and her friend Charlotte Lucas. And in effect, at one point, Elizabeth just says she's going to kind of drop her friend because her friend has married the terrible Mr. Collins. And it's a really interesting study, I think, of a kind of independent woman in the early 19th century who is intended to find her friendships primarily at home, but also the book, and in her neighborhood. But the book also, I think, admits really plainly that friendships within a family don't always work.
Right.
That friendships with simply the people who are geographically close to you, they're not necessarily going to be the closest friendships that you can find. And I think however much people look at Pride and Prejudice as a very romantic story, I think in terms of friendship among women, I think it's actually a much darker story.
Well, with that, I think we'll turn to talking about our loving or harping. Christine, are you going to love or harp this week?
You know what? I'm going to surprise you in that I was going to harp.
Okay.
I was going to harp about compliment insults.
Okay.
But, because of our conversation that we've been having over the past hour, I'm going to love.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that I really appreciate you as my friend.
Oh, that's very sweet.
And
unexpected.
That's my love.
I love you too.
I love you.
I love you too. Well, I am going to harp.
You can harp.
I'm going to harp. It's on a different subject than we've been talking about, but one that listeners, I just have to share with the wider public. So I teach a class and it meets in person. Old-fashioned in person. You come to class twice a week. You listen to me gab about whatever, history, whatever I'm talking about, and you leave. And it is not online, it is not Zoom, it is not Teams, it is not any of those platforms. It is in person. And when I reiterate this, you might think, why is she going on and on about this? This is the reason. So I have asked my students to please turn in their papers in person. And they keep asking me where to submit it on Blackboard, which is our online portal. And they are very angry that they are not submitting papers online. And they want to know why. They want to know why in a class in person, they wouldn't be submitting papers online, and why they would have to go to the trouble of printing out a paper, stapling it, walking to class, and handing it in. For some reason, this has created a tremendous amount of confusion. And I don't know why. There's nothing in the class or the bulletin or the syllabus, or this class also has been going on for 13 weeks. I have no idea why now people think that this class is an online class. And maybe it's because they've never come. But
that might be
if they have never come to class and they don't know that it is an in-person class, that is not on me. So parents, students, whoever is listening, please make sure that you know the modality of your class. And if it is an in-person class and someone asks you to print out a paper and hand it in with a staple on it, please do so.
I know printing does seem to be difficult, ancient technology, but it is still incredibly important.
And provided free by the university.
And provided free. You know what I think the ultimate lesson here, Lauren, is that students need to pay attention to your instructions. And students need to realize that you are not their friend. You are their professor. That was my attempt to tie everything together.
I think
it was a little awkward.
I do try to be their friend. Not friend like I hang out with them and I go to bars with them, but friend like a maybe older, wiser friend. I don't know. I do try to be their friend. I do try to be their advocate, and I do want what's best for them. So just hand the fucking paper in.
But they still need to staple.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we are going to sign off for this week, but we hope to see you next week, and
Harpies out.